During the Second World War, fertilizers weren't easy to come by. Chemical supplies were redirected to the war effort, shipping lanes were disrupted, and what was left was often rationed. Yet across Europe, America and beyond, families were expected to grow their own food in Victory Gardens. These weren't hobby plots, they were lifelines. The question is, how did ordinary people keep their gardens fertile when commercial fertilizer was nearly impossible to find? The answer lies in clever old-fashioned tricks that worked then and still work today. If you're serious about gardening for resilience, whether as a history enthusiast or a survivalist, these wartime methods are worth reviving. Household scraps became the new fertilizer supply. With no bags of nitrogen-rich pellets to rely on, families turned inward, making every scrap count. Vegetable peelings, coffee grounds, and even crushed eggshells were returned to the soil. Rather than tossing kitchen waste, people dug trenches right in the garden, layering scraps with soil so they decomposed directly beneath the crops. This trench composting saved time and space while delivering nutrients slowly over the season. For practical application today, start a trench along an empty row. Bury kitchen scraps a foot deep, cover them with soil, and plant above it a few weeks later. The wartime approach wasn't glamorous, but it meant nutrients never left the household cycle. Grass clippings and yard waste were treated as green gold. Another wartime lesson was that the yard itself produced its own fertilizer. Lawn clippings, leaves and hedge trimmings were all put to use. Instead of burning or discarding them, families spread clippings as mulch around vegetables, feeding the soil as they broke down and keeping moisture locked in. Leaves were raked and piled to rot into leaf mould, which added structure and fertility to tired garden beds. If you're applying this method now, spread grass clippings thinly to avoid matting or compost them with dry materials like shredded cardboard. A leaf pile left for a year will turn into a dark, crumbly amendment as rich as anything store-bought. Animal manure was reclaimed wherever possible. In many rural and even suburban areas, wartime gardeners relied on manure when fertilizer was scarce. Chicken coops, rabbit hutches and even horse stables in cities became sources of fertility. Governments encouraged people to gather and compost manure, emphasizing its role in feeding Victory Gardens. It wasn't wasted, it was gold. For modern gardeners, if you keep chickens or rabbits, their manure can be added directly to compost piles or aged before spreading. Cow and horse manure, when available, provides bulk organic matter that improves both fertility and soil structure. The wartime trick here was simply making use of what was close at hand instead of waiting for something to be delivered in a sack. Well, wood ash and fireplace byproducts actually replaced potash fertilizers back then. During the war, families with wood stoves and fireplaces discovered that ash could stand in for chemical potash fertilizers. Wood ash is, rich in potassium and calcium, both absolutely essential for plant growth. It also had the handy benefit of neutralizing acidic soils, which really helped crops like beans and peas to thrive. Wartime manuals even advised folks to scatter ash lightly around fruit trees and to mix it into compost heaps to balance acidity. For practical use today, just save ash from untreated firewood. Apply a handful around fruiting crops or mix it with compost. But do avoid overuse, as too much can push soil pH too high. This clever trick gave gardeners a steady mineral source when none could be bought. Seaweed and local resources filled critical gaps. In coastal regions, people gathered seaweed by the basketful, spreading it directly onto gardens or digging it into the soil. Seaweed provided trace minerals, organic matter, and moisture retention, advantages that made it a prized wartime fertilizer. Inland gardeners had to be just as resourceful. Some collected pond algae, while others harvested nettles, comfrey or wild plants to brew green manures, steeping them in barrels of water until they became a nutrient-rich liquid feed. A modern gardener can revive this by making a simple compost tea from nettles or comfrey. Fill a bucket with chopped leaves, cover with water, and let it ferment for a week or two. The liquid can then be diluted and poured directly around plants. It's the same principle Victory gardeners used to squeeze fertility out of whatever was at hand. Rotations and soil care reduced the need for outside inputs. Another forgotten wartime trick was planting crops in a way that stretched fertility further. Instead of planting the same crop in the same bed, gardeners rotated heavy feeders like cabbage or potatoes with legumes such as beans and peas, which naturally fixed nitrogen into the soil. By respecting the natural cycles, they reduced dependence on fertilizers altogether. Applying this today is straightforward. Follow a heavy feeder one season with beans or peas the next. Then add root crops after that. This rhythm mirrors what wartime gardeners practiced, and it ensures soil fertility is maintained year after year. The larger lesson from wartime gardens is resilience. What kept gardens productive during the shortages of World War II wasn't luck. It was a combination of thrift, observation, and ingenuity. Families learned to see every scrap, every weed, every animal byproduct as potential fertility. The methods worked not because they were new, but because they echoed practices people had used for centuries before chemical fertilizers existed. When you apply these tricks today, trench composting, leaf mold, manure, ash, seaweed, and crop rotation, you're not just gardening. You're participating in a living link to history. These techniques carried families through wartime uncertainty, and they remain perfectly suited to anyone seeking self-reliance in uncertain times today. World War II forced ordinary families to rediscover old skills and turn their yards into productive, fertile ground without the convenience of store-bought fertilizer. Their tricks still work, and they remain some of the best tools we have for sustainable gardening. By adopting them now, you not only honour that history but also prepare your own household for resilience. If you found this guide useful, subscribe to the Backyard Wisdom channel for more history-rooted survival knowledge, and share this with others who value the old ways. The solutions our grandparents relied on during shortages are still right under our feet, waiting to be put back into practice.